Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be, and whatever day this happens to be for you listening to this. I am Trish Lambert. I am not Dave Kale. And this is the Film Project. What are we on? Episode 14 of
13.
season 4?
13, yeah.
Wow, of season 4. Can you believe that? Well, Dave is not with us. I am Trish Lambert, the other co-host, the quiet one. And I'm here with Corey Olson, the Tolkien professor, and a cast of dozens, or some things, talking today a lot about stuff. We're talking a lot about stuff. I guess we're going to wrap up a couple of things from last time, but we're going to be really talking about creative content today. So that's very cool.
Exactly, yeah. So the idea here today, this is one of the things that we're doing differently, so differently that I totally forgot about it at the end of the last episode. But I was delighted to be reminded because I really loved the idea the first time, and I loved it just as much the second time I encountered it. This is one of the good things about being forgetful, is that when you come across an idea, even an idea that you had, this wasn't one of those, but even an idea that I had, and I come across it months later, all the joy of new discovery refreshed once again. Anyway, so this is great. So the idea here is we're going to be talking about creative content, not reviewing. So in the past, we've done our discussions of the episodes, and then at the end of the season, we've reviewed the creative stuff that people have done in response to the discussions that we've been having. What we're going to be doing differently this time, that's still happening, of course, but we're going to have a few kind of conversations earlier on as we're going through in order to sort of engage in a sort of a more open discussion on those things prior to the point. So, for instance, in times past, we've done casting calls for the different characters we've had, and we've had our discussions about what these characters are doing and stuff, right? We've had our plot discussions and everything, and then we do our casting call, and people nominate and elect actors and actresses to take those roles. And but the thing that we've never done before is that often we will have the discussion about, like, well, here's what we actually really think the actor or actress, in that role should look like. But we kind of have tended to have that conversation after the nominations have already happened, which I was convinced very sensibly is kind of a backwards way to do things. So we're going to have these discussions earlier on. This is so much more organized and logical a way to do things that it certainly proves to me in retrospect that it was not my idea. But anyway, I think it's great. So that's what we're going to do today. One quick announcement just at the beginning before we start off. Keep in mind that Myth Moot is coming up. We have entered we don't schedule too many regional moots right around Myth Moot. So we have this sort of Myth Moot halo in our calendar, right? This kind of buffer on either side. So we're entering the period of several months in which we have no other regional moots scheduled. Nader Moot was our last one until like August or September. But in the middle of this, of course, we have Myth Moot, our big event of the year, the end of June, 27th through the 30th of June in Leesburg, Virginia. And I just wanted to let you know that we will have some exciting announcements in the next couple weeks about Myth Moot. A lot of people have been asking, when can we sign up for rooms? That's one of them. That should be happening very soon. I'm hoping this coming week. And then there should be, there's going to be a new thing we're going to do at Myth Moot this year, which I'm pretty excited about, but I'll explain more about that next week. So, big things happening. I encourage you to check out the Myth Moot page. It is always a wonderful, wonderful event, as those can testify who have been there. June 27th through the 30th, as I say, and you can find it at signumuniversity.org/event. Find the Myth Moot page there. All right. So, actually, we're going to talk about the frame characters, but before we do, let me just go back to the title page for a second. There's a couple things that we only talked about episode 2 briefly, but there's one conversation I wanted to go back to because there were some sort of requests to revisit this. And that is sort of the sequencing of things. In particular, when does Maedhros acknowledge Fingolfin as High King? So the way that I'd been talking about that was that, as it like Maedhros abdicates, right? And then, Galadriel is sent off to Doriath. I admit that my own thinking on that was very, higher up, that is from a distance, right? I wasn't really thinking about the dynamics of episode 2 as a storyline itself. I was just kind of thinking in the abstract, right, about these events, as it seems to me that Galadriel going as an envoy to Doriath would seem to happen after Fingolfin is settled as High King, right? Like, he's probably the one who would send her. Because remember, we had that thing with Fingolfin and Galadriel last season, and the sort of tension between them, which got resolved. And so I was thinking of kind of picking that up again. So I was assuming that Maedhros, therefore, would not really be the one who was involved in sending her as an ambassador. So the abdication would happen first, and her leaving would happen next. But there's been some discussion about that, and I wanted to kind of come back to that briefly. If we want to do that differently, I'm totally open to ideas. In particular, there was the idea of kind of doing as a main plot and subplot in parallel the Feanorian, Fingolfinian politics, right, among the Noldor, which culminates in Maedhros' abdication, and then Galadriel's journey to Doriath and her arrival at Doriath. The more I think about it, the more I think about paralleling those things, that is, the result of doing them in parallel rather than doing them in series would be to have the abdication of Maedhros and the, Galadriel looking into the eyes of Melian and having her own kind of crisis of conscience happening almost simultaneously. I mean, from the viewer's perspective, they would be kind of paired together there at the culmination of episode 2. So I think that sounds lovely to me, actually, especially if, as I was suggesting, we demonstrate, we suggest that Galadriel's going as an ambassador to Doriath is a symptom of her continued ambition, right? She's somewhat chastened after last season, right? She's learned something from her conflict with Fingolfin, but I don't think she's given up, right? It might have changed the way that she does things, right? Changed her approach somewhat, modified the way she's going to go about things, but I think that she still is wanting to rule a realm, right? And I think that she still has she's still interested in power. And she's just going to kind of go a different way about it. She's not going to try to step in. We had in season 3 her believing that she could do a better job of leading the Noldor than Fingolfin was, right? And really kind of putting herself in direct competition with him. And so we have her not doing that anymore, right? She's going to be a little bit, but again, it's just a change of approach. She's going to be a little bit more devious about it. When she has her crisis of conscience, therefore, this not only is an important moment of introspection for her, this is not only her kind of wrestling with this, it also really, it's a humbling for her, right? As she begins to really kind of recognize some of the things that are in her heart, right? So I like that. And so I kind of like the idea of the humbling of Galadriel, this sort of forcible, like external, like from her encounter with Melian, she is confronted with something which is sort of external to herself, but it's about herself too, right? So, and not to mention the fact that it's just, the more I think about it, the more I love the idea of Melian, like, basically doing to Galadriel what Galadriel does to the Fellowship when they show up. I kind of like that. But anyway, so to have her be humbled, her being humbled, right, by her confrontation with Melian, and Maedhros is humbling himself, right? It's not exactly the same, obviously. There are many different things about it, but to abdicate, to acknowledge the overlordship of Fingolfin is a humble move for Maedhros. And so holding those two things in parallel seems to me to make a thematic sense. But if we do that, if we have Galadriel leaving in the beginning, we have to deal with, like, what exactly is her remit, right? And I can only see, if she does that, I can only see two logical reasons, like ways that we could contextualize that. One would be if Galadriel is just taking it on herself entirely. We could ramp up her own arrogance, right? Her own presumption, even, by hatching this plan on her own. Like, she doesn't have to, like, sneak out in the night or something like that, but you know, that she kind of puts herself forward and says she's just going to go do it, so she doesn't need any authorization from any old High King, right? So that would be one option, right? The other option would be that Fingolfin sends her, right? Because, I mean, look, the question of, like, who is High King of the Noldor might be at issue here, but at the same time, Fingolfin is in charge of the people in his camp of whom Galadriel is one, right? And there is nobody in Fingolfin's camp who is like, you know, I think we should really submit to the Feanorians. Like, they're obviously rightfully the bosses, right? And now that Maedhros is back, we should take orders from him, obviously. No one, like, literally nobody is saying that. So it would not be weird at all for Fingolfin and, you know, his folks over there to be getting together and saying, you know, hey, let's reach out to Thingol, right? Do we even need to consult the Feanorians? They're not going to consult them, right? They're, you know, sort of practically at war with them. And as Tony says, they also outnumber the Feanorians very significantly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in fact, one of the questions that I would have is the High Kingship of the Noldor even a thing yet? Exactly. I mean, I know it is in principle, like Finwë was High King of the Noldor, but think about it. In Valinor, what did that mean? Right? I mean, yeah, he was king, but the idea of High King, right? This is a new thing, right? Yeah, Finwë was king of the Noldor back in Valinor, right? But they were all at peace. That it wasn't a demanding job being the king of the Noldor. Like, it just meant he was the most highly respected of all the Noldor. I mean, like, seriously, I don't think that being king of the Noldor was exactly a 9 to 5, right? But anyway, like, when Finwë dies and Fëanor comes in, Fëanor takes control, right? He takes his father's position. But when he then orders it, like, says, okay, we're packing up and leaving, right? Everybody follow me. Fëanor is turning the kingship of the Noldor into something different that it really wasn't before, right? You could say that Finwë was leading the Noldor into Valinor across Middle-earth, and there's certainly some true to that, but certainly among the Noldor, and yeah, I mean, well, just focusing on the Noldor. Certainly among the Noldor, that was they were in consensus, right? I mean, like, they all wanted to go. So, you know, he was the leader, but he wasn't asserting his will over them in the same way, certainly, that Fëanor was when he said, okay, let's all leave now, right? And what's more, when he left, right, when he led them all to leave, one of the pitches that he made in his speech by torchlight is like, hey, let's all go, there's wide realms, right? We can all rule. And so that seems to be where the concept of High King comes from, right? You need a High King when you've got a bunch of other little kings, right? And you want somebody to still be overall in charge, right? But again, that wasn't a thing in Valinor, nor has it gone into implementation at all along the way, right? So we have, if you think about it, there are 3 phases of Noldor kingship, right? Phase 1, which is Finwë at peace in Valinor, right? Then you have Fëanor on the march, where he is, you know, through the force of his own will, leading and dominating, you know, the people to some extent. And that's like the sort of modified, to use a gentle word, perverted, one could say, twisted, if one were in opposition to Fëanor, version of Fëanor's rule, of Finwë's rule, rather, right, as he leads the people. But now we're setting up in Beleriand, right? We're setting up in Middle Earth, and there's wide realms, right? And everybody's going to set up and rule their own realm. Sure, why not? Why shouldn't they, right? There's all this land to cover. Now we need a high king, right? Now we need to make sure that it's still, we're not all hanging out, in Tyrion anymore, and yet we still need there needs to be somebody who's calling the shots. There needs to be somebody who is the number one voice of authority, especially so that we can all mobilize and be all marching in the same direction when we're trying to fight against Morgoth, right? So my suggestion about this is that the whole High King concept should not be one. The question isn't, so who's going to be High King now? The question is hey, we need a High King, right? Let's work this out. What should this look like? And once we work it out, then the question is, who's going to be it? Right. So in a sense, it's not Maedhros abdicating, because to abdicate implies that it was naturally his position and he gave it up. He was, of course, would be considered, certainly by the Feanorians, the presumptive candidate, right, for High King once that position was established. But that's kind of the conversation that we can have, right? So anyway, so the idea, right, is that we have the conversation, right? What's happening there in episode 2 is going to be the formation of the concept of High King. The reason I got onto all this and thinking about all this is, again, thinking about what is Fingolfin's position and how does he understand his own position right now? And remember, they're not talking to the Feanorians. They might be a little bit talking to the Feanorians now that Fingon is back. Fingon is probably talking to the Feanorians, right? So there's some conversation there starting at the beginning while Maedhros has been, recuperating from his injuries in the time that passes in between episode 1 and 2. But we can, though I don't think we have had his training montage yet, right? I think we can still transition Maedhros by having him still be physically weak to show that he's still taking a while to recover, right? And then we can do his training montage later on as he learns to fight with his left hand. But anyhow, okay. So all of this is what all of this means is, again, I'm kind of circling back around to Galadriel, right? Where would, at the beginning of episode 2, before these conversations have had, what's Fingolfin's mindset and the mindset of all the rest of them, right? So if Galadriel and Fingolfin and presumably a couple others, Turgon, Finrod, whoever, are having conversations, so Fingolfin, Galadriel, Finrod, maybe Fingon, maybe Turgon, are all hanging out saying, hey, okay, what should we do? We need to reach out. Are they going to feel like they're, acting out of line, right? Would it seem weird? Does it have to be a power play? I don't think so. I think it seems actually in this context pretty natural for them to have the conversation to say, we want to reach out. She wouldn't even have to be like the emissary of all the Noldor, right? I mean, she's just coming from them. She is from a Noldor, but it's not like they would be presuming that she is going to speak on behalf of the Feanorians as well as everybody else. That's kind of not even on the table. I don't even think they would think that. I kind of actually think that even after the High King is the High Kingship is established, they're not really going to think that way. Thinking back to the conversations we've had about kingship, right? Where what we see, I think, is not, the elvish High King claiming to be able to rule over everyone else, but rather just he is the commander-in-chief when there's battle to be fought, right? And when there's not battle to be fought, then they just all mind their own business and operate their own kingdoms. So I think it would feel quite natural for them to send her off. So, yeah, exactly, Tony. If she comes as something more like, the personal herald of Fingolfin himself, something like that. Yeah, no, that's she can come saying that she brings, greeting from her, from her uncle and her brothers. And yeah, I mean, that sure, that all seems to make sense. So in other words, if they do send her off at the beginning, even before the High Kingship discussion really gets going in episode 2, I think that we can depict that in a way which doesn't make it sound like a crazy, inappropriate, power-hungry move, certainly on Fingolfin's part, even though we can show that Galadriel has motives, right? That she has some kind of ulterior plan here. So anyhow, yeah, I think that's I think that all works. Thanks for bringing that up. I really like that idea. Okay, back to creative content. So our first casting question is frame characters. So we haven't talked about the frame much. We need to do that sooner rather than later. And indeed, this is something I had almost forgotten about. Also, the awesome frame concept that we had for this season. That is Bilbo going with Balin to visit the Lonely Mountain on the 7th anniversary of the Battle of Five Armies, and the conversations that could happen between, the meetings that can happen between the dwarves and Thranduil and Bard as they are celebrating the Battle of Five Armies, and to the many opportunities to talk about the reconciliation theme. I still think this is a completely brilliant discussion or concept for the frame. So let's think this through. Who's involved? It's hard to do a whole lot of characters in the frame. One advantage that we have in this particular frame, should we want to include many characters, is that they're known, right? We're not introducing characters like we were introducing characters among the Dunedain, for instance, back in season 3, right? Like we were introducing, we had Galadriel and Celeborn and Arwen, and then, some other elvish characters that we were having to invent, basically, in season 2. Here, it's a little easier in that pretty much everybody involved is known already, right? Yeah. Now, Nick, you're right that we need to be careful not to spoil too much of the Hobbit storyline, but it's not like it's a secret, right? And in particular, I think, I never even thought of the spoilers question here. I don't think that I know that the end of The Hobbit comes off as a surprise, right? Question, I guess, is what, sorry, I'm thinking about like 5 different things at once. There is the surprise move, right? As you're reading The Hobbit, there is the move for surprise. That it looks like the dwarves and the elves and the men are all going to get into combat, like shots have been fired already, and then all of a sudden Gandalf pops up and is like, surprise! Goblins! Right? And then they're all about to lose, and then it's surprise eagles, and retrospectively, surprise werebear. So, obviously, that's sort of a thing. It's to what extent can we assume that that's known? Kind of seems to me pretty clearly that that's going to be known. It seems to me foolish. It seems to me foolish to anticipate that any actual surprise is going to occur. When we get to this point in the Hobbit story, when we do the Hobbit story in 15, 20 years, I can't imagine that exactly. And if you think about it, so brace yourselves, and I know this is a painful experience for us all, but think about how Peter Jackson handled that. I know, badly. But the point is, the surprise element, right? On the one hand, he didn't, right? That is, he didn't, he didn't conceal, like the goblins weren't popping up as a surprise. Like the fact that the battle was going to be against the goblins was not the surprise. And so he didn't attempt to recreate that, where like we thought the battle was going to be the battle of the horrible civil war of 3 armies, and instead it turned out to be the bigger, though more desperate battle of 5 armies. He didn't try to replicate that exactly. He had the tension and stuff, but it was kind of known that, I mean, it was known to the viewers, certainly, that the goblins were on their way, right? But he did, clumsily, try to recreate surprise elements, right? And in this case, the surprise element that he tried to recreate is how they got there and how quickly they got there. So they still popped up through the tunnels made by the ridiculous sandworms, in unexpected places and at an unexpected time, right? So that, and again, I'm not even going to be talking about my judgments on that, but the point is, when you look at what the story of the Battle of the 5 Armies movie tried to do, was they tried to preserve, they didn't try to preserve exactly the same surprise that the story did, and then they didn't, but they did try to make it kind of surprising, right? Hakanya, and I think the sandworms surprised all of us, right? So anyhow, a couple of you, Robert and Marie, are referring to the business about Thorin's death. I guess I didn't have Thorin's death in that same category. I mean, it's unexpected, and it is in some ways, and it is kind of sprung on Bilbo, right, when he awakes. But I don't feel that the death of Thorin is like a surprise ending, right? Nor do I think that the death of Thorin... So, spoilers, right? The concept of spoilers, I mean, like the reason that the word spoil is used to describe those things is that if there, in some stories, right, in some plots, if there are details about how things are going to work out that you know in advance, it undermines the story and makes the story less enjoyable. That's a fact, right? I have always thought that stories which can be spoiled by having things about their resolutions revealed in advance are second-rate stories. Not horrible stories, but second-rate. I think that the first-rate stories are the ones for which we... Oh, Trisha's back. How are you doing? Oh, well. I think that the... Oh, wait. Hang on. Maybe Trisha's back.
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. Okay, cool. I think that the first-rate stories are the ones who, like, the emotional impact of the ending of which is only increased by knowing what's going to happen in advance, right? I mean, a Shakespearean tragedy is none the worse for knowing that the protagonist is prohibitively likely to die at the end of the play, right? So I've always thought that anticipation is many times more powerful, has more powerful an impact in storytelling than mere surprise, than the mere withholding of information. So anyhow, and the death of Thorin seems to me, of all the things which could be spoiled by previous information, seems to me the least prone to spoilage of any of the things that happen at the end of The Hobbit. If you know that Thorin is going to die, like, if what you know is that Thorin's death happens, I don't know that the story is reduced. In fact, I think that the story can be increased. We don't necessarily need to know how Thorin dies, right? We don't have to reveal the whole story. We can save some story to tell ourselves. But again, the mere fact that he's a corpse at the end of the story doesn't seem to me to be a piece of information which in any way undermines the experience of the story. Hakan, exactly. Thorin's redemption is the interesting part. And exactly like that he is redeemed and the way in which he is redeemed, that we needn't tell, a sort of unsatisfying and partial version of that story in our frame. And therefore it wouldn't be... and frankly, I don't see how we could do this frame without referring to it. I mean, like, how on earth are we going to have a 7-year commemoration of the Battle of Five Armies without anyone mentioning Thorin's death, or seeing Thorin's tomb? I mean, that seems a lot to ask. So yeah, no, I think, yeah, yeah. So no, I think we can definitely, I think that we can definitely deal with that. We don't have to make it a huge central talking point, right? They don't have to dwell on it a whole lot. So I mean, they
don't even necessarily need to mention that the tomb is Thorin's, do they? I mean,
yeah, I mean, we don't have to.
I do think fans would have probably a problem with this. When we air the thing, they'd be like,
yeah, naturally,
you spoiled it. But they don't necessarily have to mention it. I mean, they could be leaning up against the marble tomb or whatever and chit-chatting, but not mentioning that it's Thorin's tomb.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we don't have to have them talking about Thorin. We certainly don't have to have them recapping his story or telling the story of his unexpectedly heroic death. We don't have to have any of that spoiler stuff, right? That stuff which does, point to exactly where the story of The Hobbit ends, right? But acknowledging that because also keep in mind, it's a long ways down the road, right? People who know the story are going to know the story anyway, and we don't have to worry about spoiling things for them. So if there's a reference to Thorin who's dead, yeah, everyone who knows the Hobbit's
Bree says,
it.
Dian is king under the mountain, right? I mean, that's part of the frame, right? So,
yeah.
So by inference, somehow or another, Thorin is dead. He may not have died at the battle, but
right. Being there, acknowledging that Thorin is dead, remembering Thorin, being there, showing his tomb on screen. I don't think that any of those things spoil anything important about the story, really. Yeah. Yeah. Nick is asking me would I rather know or not know which of the Avengers are going to die next week. But see, Nick, it depends entirely upon how they do the story, right? If they oriented this, if they showed in the first scene which one died, and then they had the whole story focused on the anticipation of that death and how that death is going to come about and the kind of impact it's going to have, that would be awesome. I'd be totally fine with that. But again, the problem with spoilers is that, so many stories are oriented simply towards surprise and the withholding of information, and if that's how the story is oriented, then, if that's the premise of their storytelling, then yeah, having the final result revealed spoils it. But again, to me, that's not a problem with knowing information. That's a problem with that particular kind of story. But anyway, so yeah. Anyway, Chris, I'm kind of thinking this too. I mean, I think it's not a hugely impactful issue, honestly, because people who are still watching the Silmarillion show in season 4, and still haven't read The Hobbit yet. I mean, there's gonna be people, but yeah. Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I'm not I'm not super concerned about this. The more complicated issue, Maria, is the one that you raised about the question about playing coy about how the battle actually happened, right? Because we're going to have discussions among survivors of the battle, right? I mean, if we're going to have, Dan and Bard and Thranduil, sitting, having drinks, right, and rehashing the battle, it's going to be hard for it not to come out, right? That's going to be really difficult. The kind of grudges that are being held and why those grudges are being held, what needs to be reconciled, right? What is on the table for forgiveness? If we want to establish through this frame that those things all have happened and need to be reconciled and need to be forgiven, I don't think that it's gonna be hard not to. I mean, it seems to me that if we're really concerned about spoilers for the Hobbit story, I don't see how we can do this frame. I really don't. I mean, I'm prepared to do this frame because I'm not troubled about spoilers. So, I'm not saying I object to it. I'm just saying I think if you do object to spoilers, I can't see. I mean, maybe you can see, and it's fine. And no, Chris, I'm not saying that we actually want to retell the battle blow by blow. I'm just saying, if they're all getting together, the near conflict, right, between the dwarves and the elves and the men, right? And there's still going to be some bad blood there. There's still going to be discomfort. They've moved past it, right? So they're kind of modeling the moving past it, but there's not everyone will have forgotten it, right? So if they're going to ever talk about what it is that what they have moved past or still need to move past, how do we do that? Yeah.
I mean, that is the purpose of this frame, right? Is to show that.
Yeah.
That's the core of it.
Exactly.
No, I don't have a problem.
Hakan, I agree. Hakan says we should have avoided the frame altogether if we wanted to completely avoid spoilers.
Right.
I agree.
Exactly.
And it's partly my very broad-based not caring about spoilers. And here's the other thing. It's not just that in general, I think that stories that are premised upon surprise and are spoiled by spoilers are second-rate storytelling. I do generally believe that, but it's more than that here. The things that we're spoiling, right, in the frame are things from the books, generally, right? And, the books, in fact, contain a large number of spoilers for the stuff that we're talking about in this series. And one of the things which has for me been kind of a premise from the beginning, yes, the story should be able to be followed by people who have never read a Tolkien book in their entire life. But, let's be wholly blunt. That's not the audience I'm planning this for. It's not the audience I personally have in mind as I'm going through this podcast, right? The audience I have in mind, the purpose of this podcast in large part, right, is to get people who have read The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings engaged with the Silmarillion, right? If I had in one sentence to say, what is my purpose in spending the, dozens and hundreds of hours we've spent already in doing this podcast and are preparing to spend over the next several decades, that's my purpose, right? My purpose is to get people who know The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings engaged with the Silmarillion, right? And I still believe that is primarily the audience that we would be engaging with were this produced. So whatever. Anyway, the point is, again, this is my motivation for doing this podcast. The reason I like the trailer, not the trailer. Listen to me. The reason I like the frame, right, is that it provides, and one of the points of it from the beginning, right, was the way in which it roots the story, it links the story to the Tolkien stories that are more well known, right, and to the characters that people can connect with. And I think this is true, whether we're talking about Tolkien readers or whether we're even talking about film watchers, people who haven't read Tolkien but have only seen the movies. So I think it's fine. Am I saying that, we should not be thinking, that we're designing this only for Tolkien fans and shouldn't be thinking it? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm not troubled. I'm not going to lose sleep over spoiling things that Tolkien has written in his books, right? Because, that's all out there. Again, I'm not going to lose a whole lot of sleep about like people finding out, shockingly, that somebody leaking the fact that Thorin Oakenshield dies at the end of The Hobbit. Like that's been out there, right, for a long time.
Well, I think, I actually think that what's required is just some really deft story in the frame, dialogue and story. I mean, I do think there's a way you can kind of skirt the edges. Like I said, you don't have to mention him by name. You can commemorate the Battle of the Five Armies and not, I don't know, you just don't, like where's Thorin? Or you don't do that.
Right. Yeah.
But no. I think we could still do it and still stay with the fantasy that we're designing this for an actual audience.
Sure.
And I think
it's fine.
And I agree. I think it's, the end of the Battle of the Five Armies, but I think with some really creative dialogue and creative, way that you let that thing unfold, I think the spoiler percent will be low.
Yes. Yeah, we certainly don't need to give people dialogue hooks like, Bilbo coming in and being like, I was unconscious for half the time. Tell me again about Thorin's climactic charge, right? Like, we don't need to do that. Who would need to do that? That's
exactly.
not relevant.
I mean, you could do stuff like, we're here to commemorate a significant event.
Yeah,
you don't need to get into a play-by-play of, remember when we did this, and remember when the Eagles came, and then Gandalf, you don't do that.
Exactly.
And
there's no need for that.
You don't even necessarily mention that, it's dying. It's like it's 7 years later. We're into everyday life 7 years later, and they're commemorating an event, and so they wouldn't talk in that kind of a detail. So I think it's
but again,
doable.
I don't.
And then the people who know the story know it, and the people who don't know the story aren't necessarily going to catch on to the stuff that they would, So.
Sure. We just need to make sure that it's explicable.
Robert Brand says, so we're resolved we're not casting Thorin for a full flashback of the death scene.
Yes, exactly. That's not going to happen. Well, let me think about this for a second, though. What are the issues? We want to talk about reconciliation and forgiveness, right? What are the issues? They're lingering issues. There's got to be some dwarves who are still holding grudges, right? I mean, there's got to be issues.
I would think so. I would think there still would be, factions and things like that.
Yeah. Are there... So let's just, for a second, imagine ourselves 7 years forward and imagine what has happened. Are there still some open wounds? I've got to think that the elves and dwarves are still not 100% reconciled at this point. Right.
By the way, we're not going to do the Thranduil necklace thing, right? I mean, that's not a thing.
Oh, no. What, the thing that Jackson brought up and then dropped?
We borrowed that from Fingolf because we're going to,
whatever.
Like
the pseudo
somebody said that the other day, the lore thing about how people confuse the lore, and somebody said that. And I'm like, dude, first of all, Thranduil's not even named in The Hobbit. Second of all, he doesn't actually physically show up in Lord of the Rings. And third, there was no necklace.
Right.
Actually, now that I've interrupted, Tony said, speaking of spoilers, are we going to bring up the ring at all? No. Why would we bring up the ring? These guys don't really know that much about it. To tell you the truth, in this part of Middle-earth, I think from even during the war part, it wasn't that significant a factor to these guys' lives. Does that make sense? I mean, it's just, they were kind of off on a side stream of the whole thing.
And I would think, so the only people who know about the ring, right, are Gandalf knows, right? The other members of Thorin's company know, right? Balin knows about the ring. Does Daeon know about the ring? Does Thranduil know about the ring? Bilbo, I mean, even that is a little unclear in the text, right? Bilbo admits that he was burgling from Thranduil, right? When he gives him the necklace, right? When he gives him that necklace, which is then elevated by Peter Jackson into this bizarre plot thing. Anyway, like, so when Bilbo pays him back at the end, even a burglar has his feelings. He doesn't say anything about the ring. He doesn't say how he did it, right? In fact, he seems, based on his words to the Elven King at the end, Bilbo seems to be willing to leave Thranduil to believe that Bilbo is just such a cunning burglar that he actually lived without an invisibility ring in the Elven King's halls for weeks and was never detected, right? Like, that's kind of... Chris says, I have to believe Thranduil might suspect something. Me too. Me too. I think he does, but I don't know that he knows what it is, right?
It's not the ring, right? It's not.
Well, he certainly would. He certainly doesn't suspect that. But even does he specifically suspect he has a magic ring, right? I don't know, that he has some kind of magic. But of course, keep in mind, has Thranduil ever seen a hobbit before? Maybe he
true.
has. He's not that far from the Gladden Fields.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But anyway, the point is, like, maybe he thinks there's some kind of magic that this hobbit has, which enables him to do this.
He knows Bjorn can turn into a bear. Who knows what happens?
What could be more likely than that this strange little dude
turns into a shrew?
Who knows? It could happen, right? Some hobbits could be were-shrews. You can't rule it out. So, anyway, so is he suspicious? Yes. But does he know that about the ring specifically? No. In fact, I think it would be kind of funny to have a scene where Thranduil is like trying to get it out of Bilbo. Like, so how did you manage to avoid detection in my halls? And Bilbo is like, that would be telling, right? Professional secrets. Oh, no, Tony has it exactly right. He would, of course, be a were-rabbit. Absolutely, yeah. No question. That's completely correct. Anyway, point is, Thranduil doesn't know. I don't think there's any necessary reason to believe that Thranduil knows that Bilbo has a ring of invisibility. And I think it would be kind of fun to keep the actual fact from him, even though he suspects that there's some magic that he has. Does Bard know? Why would Bard know? Bard and Dan, neither one of them would know, right? They weren't in Bilbo's confidence. And as you said, Trish, it doesn't have anything to do with what happened. Bilbo put on his ring to go talk to them.
It didn't impact their lives. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's just a distant thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they would have heard, they maybe, no, they wouldn't. 7 years after. Yeah, no, he wouldn't. They wouldn't. How would he know about it?
Who would know? And Legolas wouldn't know, right? Legolas doesn't know anything until he gets to the Council of Elrond, right? It's all news to him at that point.
Well, I mean, 7 years, Gandalf isn't even sure, right? I mean...
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's got nothing but a shadow that has fallen on his heart at this point.
Right. Right.
Exactly. And when you think of even the reference when the Nazgul, or when whoever it is, right, quite possibly a Nazgul, shows up at the Lonely Mountain to seek for Bilbo, right? That message that they bring, that that Glowin brings to the Council of Elrond, right, about how they came with threatening words and were seeking a ring, the least of rings, right, that once he stole. I think it would be pretty cool if most of the dwarves were like, wait, what? Does Bilbo have a ring? I don't know. I mean, because remember, Glowin's message was, they're looking for you, Bilbo, right? Even Glowin, I think, doesn't, although Glowin knew that Bilbo had a ring, doesn't understand, like, what the deal is and why he's looking for that exactly.
Here's a question about the ring. In this frame, do we see Bilbo use the ring? Or do we just ignore it entirely?
I feel like it would be a bit of an elephant in the room thing if we had Bilbo in possession of the ring.
We're going to talk about spoilers.
And never allude to it and never have him never use it, right? That's
true. People would wonder. Yeah.
But maybe we do that. Maybe that'd be fun. Maybe it'd be fun to have that happen, and people always be, have like a big portion of the audience always expecting that Bilbo's going to take out his ring and use it at any point, and he never does, never alludes to it, it never comes out, never comes up in conversation.
He could just have his hand in his waistcoat pocket a whole bunch.
There are lots of ways we can toy with people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Tony said it. We show him playing with it in his pocket in Dark Looks by Gandalf.
Yes. We can try to depict the shadow on Gandalf's heart, right? As he's not sure exactly what's going on here. Yeah.
What if Gandalf could say to Bilbo, "What have you got in your pocket?"
Oh, it would be funny if somebody delivered that line.
Huh?
Oh yeah, that'd be hilarious. Yeah, he's got his hand in his pocket, and Gandalf says, "What have you got in your pockets?" Oh, that's hysterical. I love it. Okay, sorry. Maria's pointing out very rightly that I'm not making much progress in the casting discussion, but this is we needed to talk about the frame anyway, so it's all good. We haven't made much of a plan about the frame here, but at least we're kind of ironing out what is and is not going on. But wait, so all right. Let me continue on this one line of thought, which is going to lead me, though confessedly, indirectly, back to the casting question. Back to my question about who's holding grudges. What's the atmosphere, right? How does this all work? So we want to get to the point where the dwarves and the men of Dale are on really friendly terms again, right? And where peace has been restored. We get that little glimpse, right, from Balin's visit at the end of The Hobbit, right, of peace being restored and old relations resuming, right? It's important that story ends with a glimpse of things going back to the way that they were almost, right, before the dragon came. One thing I would point out, though, is that that's when The Hobbit was a freestanding and completely self-sufficient little fairy tale, right? And so having almost everybody and live happily ever after, made more sense in that context. This was not the, beginning of a long and troubling period of Middle-earth history there. We could choose, therefore, to have things be a little bit in practice, a little bit less idyllic than they kind of sounded, right? It's maybe not quite as simple as that. In fact, certainly if we're going to be thinking more about this storyline later on, and I don't see why we wouldn't, when we get to this part of the story, if we want to build up to eventually in, season whatever, 60, if we get to if we get there, then we would presumably want to have the final battle in which Dain and Brand are killed. We would kind of want that to be the place where that would be to be a culminating moment, right? We would maybe want some drama there. I mean,
you're thinking men and dwarves. I was thinking dwarves and elves.
Well, the dwarves and elves, that seems to me a given, right? I mean, there is no way that the dwarves are going to just forget about the fact that Thranduil A held the dwarves captive unjustly, right? And B then tried to horn in on their treasure when he thought someone else had conveniently killed the dragon for him. So his greed, which he was guilty, right? Thranduil guilty as charged on the greed front, and holding the dwarves unjustly without trial. You can make out a case. A prosecution lawyer could make out a pretty good case there, right, against Thranduil. And if you're a dwarf, I don't see how you don't hold grudges for both of those.
And I can see Thranduil still being unrepentant about that. Tony and Maria both brought up what if we see the beginning of the unrest of Balin that would lead him back to Moria? And if that comes up, I could see Thranduil saying something like, "Oh, and how do you plan to get there?"
Oh man.
You know?
Yeah. The idea that, because of course one of the questions is, what is the dwarves' motivation to reconcile? They need the men of Dale to some extent, right?
They talk, right?
Yeah,
Commerce.
in commerce. I mean, do they need the elves of Mirkwood? Couldn't they just be like, you wood elves, you enjoy your isolationist selves over there. We don't care about you, because we have the men of Dale and of Esgaroth, and we're gonna trade down the river, and it's fine, right?
Well, it could be the men end up being sort of the sandwich filling. You know what I mean? They're kind of like the Switzerland for both sides. You know what I'm saying? Because actually, sort of the elves are also doing business with the men of Dale. I mean, Esgaroth. Yeah. So, so the Lake Town and the Dale men become kind of the lubricant, the shield in the two, and,
exactly.
and really the dwarves and elves have never really reconciled totally. They're just sort of in an uneasy truce situation.
Right, exactly. So then if there's a desire to achieve some kind of reconciliation through this event, right, through this commemoration, it would be initiated by Bard.
Yep.
Or, I mean, like, by the men. Anyway, it needn't be Bard personally. Yeah.
By the way, so Dick was saying, so you're saying that they wind up needing the elves to let a large contingent of dwarf bound for Moria through Mirkwood. Yes, they would. But, back to what Corey was saying, I think Balin's solution to that when the time comes would just be to play on Thranduil's greed. So he'd just buy his way through Mirkwood when the time came. So it's an easy peasy.
Except that they wouldn't want to do that, or feel like they should do that, or had to do that.
But the drive to get to Moria might overcome. It's like, oh, this is a small irritant we have to do. Just to get there, kind of thing. I mean, how else would they get there? I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember. Wait a second. The Lonely Mountain is the gateway to Angmar. I forgot they could go through Angmar. Sorry.
Wouldn't be too hard to create some reasons that would make that uncomfortable, right?
Jackson. Gateway to Angmar.
Well, all right.
Anyway, that's way down the line, so back to casting.
Hakan says it's a pity we don't have men in the main story if men are going to be the diplomats in the frame.
I was thinking about that too earlier. I thought, geez, we're almost like a little premature with this frame.
Well, yeah, but thematically, it works really well.
Doesn't mean we couldn't come back here. We could certainly come back to this location as a frame at another time in the history,
I actually kind of don't mind it as a bit of an anticipation, I mean, like, look, we've had humans in almost every frame so far, right?
That's
so
true.
it's not like spoilers, humans exist, right? Like that's so.
Oh, no, I was thinking of it as how we did the frame, like when we had Estelle learning, and then that was kind of the way we leveraged when we leveraged. And I think that's probably what Hakan's saying too. There's all these future stories to come to the Silmarillion with the men, but that doesn't mean we can't come back here. It
doesn't mean that we can't have men in this frame, because I don't think it's not like we're going to be. It's not like we're going to be dealing with the men, really kind of anticipating the issues we're going to be having with the men in the next season. I don't think, right?
Right.
Certainly, the position that the men are in here is nothing like the position the men are going to be in season 5. So we're not really anticipating that.
And I'm thinking we can come back to this location, Dale, Esgaroth, Erebor, when Turin is dealing with his own little dwarf. Later.
Maybe.
I mean, that's kind of the parallel that we could, but that, like, just because we're using this now doesn't mean we can't use it later in a different way, frame-wise. Is that clear?
Yeah.
We can always come back to Lake Town, Dale, Erebor.
Yeah, I know we always could. Well, how can I agree that in a sense they're going to be central? I've always felt that they should be hosting it. Dale should be the site of the get-together, right? Because the elves aren't going to want to go into the Lonely Mountain for fear that they possibly won't come out. And
which, by the way, also makes it possible that we don't even have to have Thorin's tomb around, so that's good.
True. Yeah, we wouldn't see Thorin's tomb unless we wanted to have Bilbo making a field trip, which he certainly would. I mean, Bilbo is obviously going to go into the Lonely Mountain while he's there.
Right.
But whatever. We can... but yeah, so Dale will be the location. So they'll be the hosts, Hakon, and therefore central, but I don't think thinking of them as diplomats. I don't even think it's diplomats so much
like
as hosts.
Right?
Yeah,
Like
hosts. They're hosting the party and they're inviting them and they're sort of friends with both. But I don't think what we're seeing is an active diplomatic move or I think it's they aren't arbiters. Exactly, Nick. That's not the role that I see them playing. And it gives us
as guests, if they're the hosts, then as guests, all of those people, Balin and Dian and Thranduil, have to behave themselves. That's kind of part of the code of being a guest.
Exactly. So it's not like he's negotiating with them. He's like, wouldn't it be great to get everybody together in a place where, like, and under circumstances in which, like, they are all honor bound not to fight with each other.
Right. And this won't be a red wedding.
No, this will not be a red wedding. That is so not happening here. Yeah.
Which actually would be kind of interesting because then you still could see the tension, and Thranduil would say something like, well, I am a guest in your house and I must not.
Yeah.
We must not continue this conversation because I can't be answerable for my actions or, something that shows that there still is enmity there or actually be the other way around. Probably, the dwarves would be being irritable about the elves.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as what so Hakon, whether or not the men are being active in solving some kind of issue, I think that can be Bard's motivation. He can want to bring folks together. Bring Dan and Thranduil together so that they can all talk together, and he can hope for some kind of positive outcome from this. Because after 7 years, everyone is still well aware of the tension. No one more than the men, right, who are dealing with both of them equally and uncomfortable about the tension that remains between them. So he knows. So again, I don't think it need to be a very active plot on his part. Like, I'm going to invite I've got a great idea. It's a 7-year anniversary. Let's all get together. You come to my house. You all agree to obey. And, let's hope that things
bagels.
move.
Lox and bagels.
Exactly. And as Marie points out, Bard is not exactly like a flowery words kind of guy. He is a grim, gruff man. And he's not going to be speechifying, right? He's not going to be, making oily overtures in both of their directions and trying to negotiate a peace treaty between them. And
Marie also does point out that this is a story about reconciliation, but I'm thinking that that's the arc, right? I mean, we can have some form of reconciliation by the end of the season with the frame.
What and how much, I wonder.
Right.
Hakon is wanting some unsolved issues, and now I agree, Hakon. One of the things that we're showing in the season, right? When we're talking about a forgiveness and reconciliation theme this season, that doesn't mean the story arcs of the season are about everybody getting together and holding hands by the final episode, right? Some of the ways in which we manifest the theme of reconciliation and forgiveness in this season is showing the people who will not forgive and who don't reconcile. So I am perfectly fine with having an element of that in the frame. I think it would be a little bit disappointing if there's no positive movement. I mean, we have some reason to think that there are positive relations many years down the road. So showing a sort of a step in that process. I would want there to be some kind of process. Somebody, I forget who it was, and some of you can maybe remind me of the there was a move on the discussion board to involve, it was Marielle. Okay, right. It was Marielle to involve Bard's wife, to give Bard's wife a prominent role.
She could be the speechifying one. She's
Yeah,
probably a role proper.
having her be this sort of singer, and so the
She could
Marielle's
be the lady
concept
of with
was
the cup, only for men. I mean,
yeah,
not
yeah,
non-sex, but that kind of thing. Lady of the Hall, sort of.
yeah. She
You know,
would be an important element in hosting, obviously, as
absolutely.
the I mean, not that the Bardings are exactly like the Rohirrim, right, or following Anglo-Saxon customs in
No.
the same way, but still, there's that she would have an important role there,
Hmm.
um, and so
Now this is, and Bard's son isn't Brand, right? Brand is a grandson, correct?
correct,
And Bard's
yeah,
son, we don't know how old he'd be because he could actually play a part, but he would be early teens probably at this point.
yeah, we don't know to what extent he existed in The Hobbit, but yeah, I'd probably make Ban a teenager,
Yeah, I would think,
something like
like
that,
because he was probably maybe like 6 or 7 at the time
yeah,
of the battle. Otherwise, he would have been fighting probably.
yeah. Yeah, now Tony is suggesting that we could possibly have the rebuilding of Esgaroth be the setting, and therefore the new master of Lake Town be the host. That idea has some merit, and I certainly think that we should have a scene or
Oh, that's
two down
interesting.
there. Like we should
Yeah.
definitely involve Lake Town, and it'd be kind of fun to meet the master. Hey, look, we already have a long list of characters, and the new master of Lake Town is not among them. So, Marie, we're going to add more characters, and it's Tony's fault. Absolutely Tony's fault. So just remember that. Anyway, but I kind of like Bard and his wife. I think I would want them to be sent, because the other thing is that the Master of Lake Town is a much more minor character. So to have this whole thing initiated by one of the sort of central core figures politically here, is I think that'd be better. So okay, who
And
gets?
how, by the way, back to Bard's son,
Yeah,
just a quick side.
sure.
You know how we did this? People will have forgotten it by season 4, but you know how we did this? I think it was in season 1 where Hobbit Bilbo met Estelle, right? Didn't we do that? Where they had a little chit chat.
Yeah, we did.
So, I mean, there could be something similar here in terms of that. Bilbo like gets along really well with Bard's son. He sort of has an affinity that could allow some interesting dialogue and
Mm-hmm.
story.
Mm-hmm. It would be interesting. I mean, one of the things that makes Ban an interesting potential character in the frame is that it would be kind of fun to have the perspective of a younger generation. Like Ban would
Hmm.
have grown up in the New World, like post Battle of
Right,
Five Armies.
exactly.
He
That's
wasn't
true.
born after it,
Yeah,
but I mean,
that's right.
the Battle of Five
They
Armies
got,
happened when he was what,
I
6,
know.
7,
It's like
maybe.
they have smartphones now, so
Exactly.
you know what I mean.
So the idea of having somebody who can be a voice for, and especially remember, one of the major differences here, of course, the men are mortal and they change faster. So while the dwarves and elves are living a long time and holding on to this enmity, the men have moved on, like in every way. Like they've moved on as far as adapting more easily.
Right.
They've moved on in the sense of dying and having their children grow up, right? So even that, like I mean, it's only been 7 years, so it's not like we've had a whole generation pass, and lots of the veterans of the Battle of Five Armies are still alive, obviously. But again, just to have somebody who is a voice like Ban has never known anything else, right?
Plus, he can. That's true, and he can ask Bilbo questions about stuff.
That's how we can get Bilbo to give detailed explanations of everything that happened in The Hobbit. Anyway.
Yeah, it all started with this like party that I wasn't expecting to have.
Exactly. Yeah. No. I mean, I'm not saying we need to make Ban a major character, but I think there's some interesting potential there, and especially I'm thinking towards the theme of reconciliation and forgiveness. He's going to have a different perspective on this, right? And he is in a sense a spokesperson for that future into which Bard really wants everybody to move. Right, like in which this is past and a non-issue anymore.
That's true. The whole enmity between dwarves and elves could confuse him, and he doesn't really understand.
Ban, right? Exactly. He's like, what's the?
And he's going to have to take it
problem?
over. I mean, he's going to have to step into those shoes and not too disappear in terms of being the, guy between the two. But yeah, so there's
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, and I'm with Corey. We're not talking about making him a huge character. It's just there's some possibilities there.
Right. I think, by the way, it would be cool if Bard's wife was the motivator for the peace talks. Because Bard,
Yeah,
I think, is kind of...
thing.
I think Bard would just be kind of impatient. I mean, I think Bard is more likely to
agree.
want to just knock their heads together and be like, I have no patience for this ridiculous dwarf elf. Like, get over it, people, right? We're past that. And he's not a diplomat, right? But for his wife for it to be, again, I don't know that we show the planning stages, right? But if this whole thing were kind of Bard's wife's idea in the first place, to have her... I love the idea of having her have a very significant role. Mariel's vision there was that she's this sort of singer, storyteller, like keeper of memories of the court, and therefore a very prominent, important figure within Bard's court, not just Bard's wife. And therefore has great influence in what happens. I think that's kind of cool. I kind of like that too. And Bard, it kind of seems to me, in order to be a good king, Bard is kind of probably need a little bit of help.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, like, let's not get over the fact that, like, remember, the first reaction of the men of Laketown to Bard is rolling their eyes, right? Like, that was an element, I think, of Bard's character that, surprise, surprise, in the Hobbit movies, Peter Jackson didn't do an excellent job with everything. But I mean, that what Bard's position is. Like, there are people who take him seriously. They know that he's trustworthy. They know that he's, he's not just a wet blanket for no reason. But again, like, he makes people roll their eyes. Like, he's always prophesying gloomy things, and he's negative about stuff. Right?
Kind of an Eeyore, right? He's like an Eeyore, right?
A little bit. I mean, yeah. I mean, he's kind of a downer, right? I don't think he's blunt of speech, right? We see that even with Bilbo. I remember, when Bilbo was like, "My dear Bard," right? As Bard is doing his, like, "I'm going to cut to the chase here. Are you betraying your friends or threatening us?" Right? He's like, I'm just going to cut to the quick here and get to the point. That's Bard, right? Anyway, so as Marie says, as a king, he could use a bit of sunlight to balance him out. Exactly, right?
Now,
somebody with a little more wisdom, right? A little bit more people skills.
Yeah, I think we'd have a little bit of a fine line. I'd like us not to be doing the trope of the power behind the throne thing.
No.
Being the power behind the throne.
Agreed.
So we'd want to kind of walk that line. And I think what would work would be to show a partnership.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Between the two of them, not necessarily like everybody, they're not like William and Mary, but there's a definite partnership there, and maybe he's even softened a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. No, I am not suggesting a wife who, like, encourages him and gives him talkings to behind the scenes, right? And like feeds him his lines to deliver in public. Yeah, exactly. No, that's not at all.
But actually, I think we've made some casting progress here. So we know Bard. We need somebody gruff. Personally, I think Luke Evans was way too sunny. I mean, I think somebody. I'm picturing like a unibrow kind of.
Yeah,
person.
I was just gonna say that. Luke Evans is also too cute. Like he's. I mean,
craggy. I'm thinking craggy. Almost
something
like a
more craggy. Absolutely.
Guy,
Yeah, he needs to look at Bard needs to be somebody who, if you like walked around a corner, in the grocery store and like walked into him, you'd be like, "Whoa, sorry, man.
Whoa.
Let me step aside
Back
and
away.
let you get past." Yeah. Like Bard should have a face like that, right?
Yeah.
And yet. Unibrow. That's like he needs to have like a heavy forehead, right? And he'd be able to do that, like
really dark. Dark.
Yes. Yeah. Very dark. Agreed. Yeah. No. Tony suggests that what if Bard's wife is an analog of Melian and her role? Tony, I hadn't articulated that to myself, but I think that's kind of what I was imagining to myself when I was thinking of her role. Unconsciously, I think. I don't want to parallel it too closely because this is a human culture, and so it's different from the elves and how they work and Thranduil Thingol. Look at me, actually accidentally mistaking Thranduil for Thingol. How could that happen? And anyway, so I'm not saying that they're obviously not the same in everything, but anyway, that's
Now, I also don't want to lose a point that Bray made. Dis would now be, if they have succession for women, the leader of the Blue Mountain Dwarfs. So she would be at this like as a emissary from the Blue Mountains, potentially.
Yes.
Now,
The
I'm not
dwarf
sure.
women issue.
I'm not sure. Yeah, and I'm not sure that that's their succession model.
Yeah. No, me neither. Nor how exactly we want to handle this.
I also, let's see, was it hereditary? Well, it was somewhat hereditary. It is hereditary, right? But it's patriarchal, right?
Marie points out that she also fills the war widow role, as she lost both her brother and both her sons in the battle.
Yeah, that's true.
That does give her a really interesting, and I use this word trying not to be offensive to dwarves, humanizing influence, right? Speaking of personal loss, there's nobody who could speak to personal loss in the Battle of Five Armies more powerfully than Dis, right? Who did lose her whole family in the Battle of Five Armies. Yeah, exactly, Nick. That's the plan. The plan is to fridge Keely and Feely for Dis's benefit. Yeah. That's it. That's it. Anyway, yeah. And Tony says if she's a leader, then that's an antecedent for Telkar. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
And she's not a queen necessarily, right? She's not a queen. Right. Diane is king under the mountain. I don't know that there's a king or queen in the Blue Mountains. It's not really a kingdom per se.
Yeah, I mean, it was
more like a chief, or she's like Grace O'Malley. She took over as chieftain. No, seriously, she took over as chieftain from her father, and she was like a big pirate queen, right? So, yeah, I have a big thing for Grace O'Malley.
It was like a realm in exile, right, over there in the Blue Mountains. So yeah, kind of a chieftainess. So if we made her a direct parallel to Telkar, like she could be the sort of de facto leader because she's like the greatest smith among them, right? I mean,
oh, true.
Why not, right? So just she could be a kind of chieftainess in that.
And that
way.
would make sense as to how they would choose their chiefs, actually.
Just like because she's the most respected one among them, so she comes. She'd come separately from Bilbo.
Now, I'm not sure that she has a beard. Wasn't the women have beards? That was a movie thing, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Though there's a reference that they don't look that much unlike the men.
Right.
So
there's not. Yeah. Right.
Making the joke about it's the beards was a film thing.
Right.
But Tolkien's description did leave that door open. I'm saying, I mean, it's there.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah, Tony's saying, what if she comes at Gandalf and Bilbo's invitation? That is really interesting. Yeah.
Poor Marie, this has got to be frustrating her so much. We're talking more about the frame than we are about the cast.
We're getting there. No, this needed to be done anyway. It's all good. Sooner or later, we had to have these discussions.
Yeah, I don't have any worries about it. I mean, we can always extend the casting conversation.
Well, and talk about the other things we have to talk about later.
That's right. Yeah,
but anyway,
absolutely.
No, it's all good. Besides which, my plan is to be super efficient with everything else that we're going to talk about. So that's it. That always works out. Okay, so I like the idea, because if Dis is going to come from the Blue Mountains, right, then I mean, she's going to come along the dwarf road, which goes right smack through the middle of the Shire, right? So,
well, yeah, like Chris says, she should come with Bilbo, right?
what if it's Bilbo's idea to invite her? What if Balin comes to Bilbo to invite Bilbo, right? Balin and Gandalf come to Bilbo to invite Bilbo, and Bilbo's like, hey, we should bring Dis, right? We should bring Fili and Kili's mom, Thorin's sister, right? Wouldn't she? Is she in the Blue Mountains still? And yeah, I mean, that would be cool. And since it's just the frame, it's not like we'd have to spend a lot of time on the long journey, you know, Balin, Bilbo, Gandalf, and Dis, right?
You could actually just cut straight to that scene of them being on the road.
Yeah, we're only going to get a couple scenes, right? And we wouldn't want to protract the journey. And as Bree points out, Dis is also Balin's cousin, so it wouldn't be like, hello, exalted craftsman of the Blue Mountains. This random hobbit whom you may or may not have heard of is inviting you to go on a super long journey with him. Would you? Yeah, Balin can show up, and they're related.
Right.
Yeah. So Tony's suggesting that her showing up would then be a surprise to Dan and Bard. Yeah, sure. They wouldn't know she was coming. Hakon is saying we could spend the whole frame in the Blue Mountains. Nah, no, I want to involve the humans, Hakon. I want to do it. I love the Lake Town idea. Okay, right, all right, yeah. So let's see if we can do that. So let's see. Apart from Bard, whom else? And by the way, I think that Ban should be less. I mean, obviously he's going to be younger, so he's not going to be able to be as like gruff and craggy as Bard. But I think that he should look softer, right? He should be.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, like that.
Well, he'll have some of his mother's, attributes. So lighter coloring.
Yeah.
Still maybe,
Still
a
maybe
touch of a
hair,
unibrow, maybe a little bit of a unibrow. I mean, but
just a shade of unibrow.
Just a shade of unibrow.
Right. Just
you
kind
could
of a
wax
few
out.
hairs.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, so what would we be looking for? Yeah, in the wife. In the wife, I think we want a
I don't want it to be a mirror. I don't want it to be like super opposite.
No. We don't want her to be like,
This needs to be a woman who would actually be attracted to him, right?
Yes,
as he is,
and not,
so
and this is not like she's like the soft feminine side of Bard. Like, no, it's not like that. No. She's a strong character. She's just different.
Practical.
Like, she just has a very different strengths, right? And a different role. But
I could see her being practical, kind of brisk, but in a positive way. I mean, like gets things done. She gets things done.
And I'm thinking like wise and penetrating and discerning, like really good at like, summing people up and seeing to the heart of matters.
We can do kind of a test conversation, kind of like, Galadriel does with the Fellowship, right? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Non-telepathically, yeah.
Non-telepathically.
She's passing notes instead. But no, I mean, I think she should have something, but though it's not a horrible parallel, Trish. I mean, something of Galadriel's presence, right? There should, I think that she should have something of a more. Bard is intimidating.
I have an idea. Is there any reason why she couldn't come from someplace like Rohan?
Where does she come from?
Is she going to be a Dale lady, or is she going to be somebody? Do we have her be from?
What if she's one of the woodmen? Or even like a Bjorning or something.
Then we have to get into the question of whether she actually shapeshifts or not, which is an open question.
Yeah. What if she's a Bjorning?
That would be interesting, actually.
It would be interesting. Well,
by the way, is Bjorn going to be at this party?
Ooh, good question.
That would be kind of an insult not to invite him, wouldn't it?
Getting the whole band back together except for Bjorn?
Yeah, or maybe he couldn't come or something. I don't know.
We could invent a reason for him not to be there. He could even be dead if we wanted to kill him off. I mean,
And we don't need to bring Radagast into this, right? He didn't. I mean, I don't know.
yeah.
He does live in Mirkwood, but or does he live in Mirkwood in the books? We don't know where he lives, do we? So he may not
No,
be involved at all.
Roscoble. No, we.
Oh, that's right, Roscoble. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. I get confused. It's like I don't. Was it a book or was it in the movie? I don't remember.
I don't see why we'd want to do that.
Somebody could say Radagast and Bjorn are off on some mission in Gundabad.
Okay, so yeah, Marie's saying we don't want everyone there. I agree.
Yeah,
We'd have a hard
no,
time if we just have like cast of thousands. You know, like
Yeah.
if
maybe there's
we
some
have
way
just
we
a
could
crowded
explain Bjorn
room,
not being there.
Yeah.
You know.
or we could. I mean, we could have Bjorn. Bringing Radagast, I think, is I don't think we should bring Radagast because he's
No,
not in the
okay.
Hobbit, right? He's alluded
No,
to, but he's not in the
Right.
Hobbit.
No.
So he's not part of the story here.
No.
But can
Is
we
there any
have
reason why
can we have a
Bard's
frame that
wife
involves
could be
Radagast later
Bjorn's-
down the road? I want
Oh,
to
yeah, we
do
gotta
some.
do that,
I want to do
please.
something with Radagast. Now, I mean, we can obviously tell Radagast's story when we get to the Third Age, like that. I think is a given. But
yeah. No, hopefully sometime like when we maybe I don't know when, but we got to do something with she could be Bjorn's daughter. That's kind of a stretch. Bard's wife.
politically,
You know,
it makes all kinds of sense.
Politically, it makes enormous amount of sense, and it's a chieftain, it's a peer match.
We'd have to make Ban younger. I mean, he'd have to be like 6.
Oh,
instead
that's
of
true.
A teenager.
Yeah. Instead of a teenager.
Presumably, Bard didn't have a chance to marry
Well,
Bjorn's wife or daughter till
That's
after.
true, and that's actually not a bad idea. He really, truly would be of the new generation. He would be,
but he wouldn't be a
post-battle
very
completely.
articulate member of the new generation. I mean,
No.
I have lots of respect for 6-year-olds, but I've known several, and it would be hard.
Well, how
for
old
him
was
to-
Estelle when Bilbo met him in Rivendell?
10?
This is the same.
Ish.
Oh, he's a 10. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Older than some of the presenters we've had at regional moots. So, yeah. So yeah, no, I think it makes Bane too young, and I think it makes a kind of sense politically.
Yeah.
But Tony is suggesting that we do Radagast when we do Arathel and Eowyn,
I
but that's
like
next
that.
season.
No.
Well, we'll see. We'll think about that.
Keep it in the back of your mind.
Yeah. Okay. We don't have to make that decision now. That's a true digression. Okay. I love Hakon's suggestion that there's another party in Roscoble at the same time, so everyone can't come. That's where Bjorn is. He's partying with Radagast, and he had a conflict. It was hard. Anyway, yeah. Okay, so let's bring Bjorn. Why shouldn't we bring Bjorn?
Okay.
Clearly, he'd be invited.
Talk about unibrow. Now we really have a character that's a unibrow, right? Woo!
How do we even do cast Bard if Bjorn has to be worse? All we need is somebody who's like 8 feet tall. And so we'll just start with that. And Bjorn could not come. I mean, he could refuse the invitation. And everybody could kind of laugh about like the, bluntness and rudeness with which Bjorn refuses the invitation.
That's true. That would be a lot easier because look at this list we've already got, right? We've added these to it, right? So, I mean, adding Bjorn, I don't see any reason not to just say, geez, not only did he not come, but you should have seen his refusal.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, we don't have to have Bjorn there. Let's see what people on the discussion boards think if they're very pro Bjorn or anti Bjorn.
Nick will remind everybody that we're talking frame story here. So let's.
Yeah. I'm willing to go either way with that. Okay. So, Celeborn's sister.
Right.
We had talked about
we didn't resolve the wife.
We didn't resolve the wife. Okay, so wife, we want.
So they're married. They're married before the battle.
They're married before the battle.
Right. It won't be Bjorn's.
It won't be Bjorn's daughter, but that's fine. She needs to be strong. I think she doesn't have to be gorgeous.
No, in fact, I would think not.
or especially, like, again, she's not girly, right? I would think
I think the Woodman's, of the Woodman is a good idea, because that would be.
Oh, Tony's really mixing it up now. Tony's like, what if she's an Easterling? Oh man, no, that's one too many. I can't. Yeah, no.
Well, and I would think, the Woodmen too. It's like they'd have a lot in common that way, right? In terms of geographically and.
Yeah. Yeah. So she'd be
very practical.
Yeah, she could be. I still kind of like Marielle's idea about her being the sort of the singer and the, yeah. No, Tony, I'm not sure I want, the reason I don't want the Easterling thing is because then we have the whole, like, the king of, like, Brand himself is of Easterling race, and it could be interesting, but I'm not sure I want to go there. Yeah, I think that's one too many for me. Especially since we don't have much time to, like, introduce stuff here. Like, let's not make it too ornate, right? We don't even have to talk about where she comes from, obviously.
No, we don't. And I think a lot of it, a lot of it's just backstory to help with the casting. So we just need, because a lot of this, I mean, we're not going to talk about the fact that she's of the Woodman in the frame.
Yeah.
Or even the fact that she's a storyteller singer. We're not going to talk about that. We may see her.
We may show it in some ways.
Show it.
Yeah.
But so a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about is like backstory that we're actually not going to write into the story itself, but you need to know in order to cast the people.
Right.
Now, do we need Celeborn's sister here, really? Is a Celeborn's sister part of the party?
We had talked about this. So we had talked, when we were talking about Celeborn's sister, who, remember, is the leader of the narco-syndicalist commune, which is the Green Elves.
That's right.
Right. So anyway, we had talked about her being in Mirkwood, like she's still around, in the Third Age, and that she's ended up in Mirkwood, which is what raises then the possibility, because that's a sort of an interesting connection if we actually have one person from the main storyline who is also in the frame, right? We have an actual link between the frame story, and she would be the only opportunity for that.
That's true.
It's kind of interesting.
She could say, "Where have I seen this before?" She could muse.
Yeah. Let's go back to the reconciliation thing. We've got Thranduil and Legolas. I mean, I'm not leaving that question, the Celeborn's sister question, just coming at it from a different direction. What movement is going to happen? Is there going to be any progress towards the reconciliation of dwarves and elves? And the first thing I want to say to that is that it needn't be unified, right? We can leave with some dwarves and some elves still as grumpy as ever, but some dwarves and some elves not being, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be unified. We don't have to simplify that. Yeah, so this brings up the Legolas question, which we shouldn't avoid. We've got an issue of reconciliation between elves and dwarves, and Legolas has got to be there. I mean, we could contrive to send him off, but realistically, he's going to be there. How do we want to play that? One of two choices, right? We either use it to lay the seeds for his friendship with Gimli down the road, or we don't, right? Or we have him be opposed, right? Have him be... Is Legolas the one... Does Thranduil make some progress and Legolas is still stubborn in his irritation with dwarves at the end?
Well, remind me, what's his demeanor what's Legolas's demeanor in the book? I always get it confused with the movie. So,
well,
does Tolkien really define his attitude toward dwarves?
It's hard. It's hard because he doesn't not get that many lines. Legolas perhaps accomplished least of any of the Nine Walkers.
I mean, obviously later down the line they get into their little, competition, and that's great, and they become great friends. I mean, I'm trying to remember. There's not really a lot of
Their friendship
dislike to get
begins in
over.
Lothlorien. I mean, we don't get
Yeah.
many interactions between them.
And it's not like they overcome some kind of dislike or distrust of one another before that friendship, right? They're just kind of like nothing. They're just part of the fellowship. And then in Lothlorien, they start to form a friendship.
Yeah, and there is that conflict, the line that Murray's recalling about the stiff necks of elves, right? But there, see, does that mean that Legolas is stiff-necked? No, I think it's Gandalf throwing Legolas's own words back at him, right? Now let us say, right, about the stiff necks of elves. I mean, the point that I think that Gandalf is making is like, he's not being any more stiff-necked than you are. I think it's not an indicator of I almost said Lancelot. Been doing too much Sir Thomas Malory. It's not an indicator of Legolas's character. It's an indicator of Legolas's assumptions about dwarves, right? That he sees them as stiff-necked. Yeah. And Chris, you're right. We learn almost nothing about Legolas in the Council of Elrond, right?
Oh, yeah, that's
as far
true.
as like his attitude and his perspectives. So it's hard to see. I mean, I think it'd be exaggerating the case, like Jackson did, right? If we bring in Legolas with like a fixed distrust of dwarves and then have Gimli win him over. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do. We could do that.
Well, he probably would have some degree because he'd be influenced by his father, who has no love at all for dwarves.
Right. Is there anyone
he's been living for the last 7 years with his father?
Move, though?
Well, I was going to say he's been living the last 7 years with his father, totally justifying why he would have imprisoned all those dwarves. So,
Right. Well, and it might make perfect sense to him anyway.
Yeah. The only good dwarf is an imprisoned dwarf.
It's an imprisoned dwarf. They have that like cross stitched on their throw pillows, in Thranduil's palace. Yeah. Okay, but so here's my problem. Who's going to budge? If there's going to be at least one elf who budges, whom?
Well, Tony makes a good point, saying Thranduil might make the political move. So I mean, the reconciliation could be a political type, motivated by politics, not so much. I mean, he still, personally would rather not have to sit down and break bread with dwarves, but politically he understands that he needs to give way.
So maybe there's still never been trade between the elves and dwarves since the Battle of Five Armies, right? They've been at peace, but they've been in an unignoring each other peace, right?
Well, what they've been doing is buying elves have been buying the dwarves' goods through the men with a markup. So the men have been making out big time because they've been
in which case Bard is motivated not to reconcile the elves and dwarves. The master of Lake Town should be like, dude, can we talk about this? This is super bad idea.
Wait a minute, before we do this, I need a contract with both sides that I'm still going to be the middleman.
Yeah. The master of Lake Town in the background being like, no, with the reconciliation.
Oh my God.
Oh man. Now, yeah, Chris is right. They are, the elves of Mirkwood. I mean, it's not that far. It's not been that long for them, right? From Doriath,
Yeah,
they remember that.
That's true.
Celeborn's sister, as I think Marie was reminding us, she is not over fond of dwarves, right? She remembers the original conflicts between dwarves and green elves that we did in the beginning of season 3. So,
right.
Yeah.
By the way, I like what Tony is saying. What if the issue is free movement through Mirkwood?
Right, to open up the roads.
Mm-hmm.
And even for the elves to like keep the roads.
Mm-hmm.
We could have, and Tony, that would, well, literally pave the road for Balin to return to Moria.
I was just thinking, like, at the end of the frame, Balin could say, "I'm glad we did that because I have a
Yeah,
trip in mind."
right. That might come in handy
leave it.
at some point soon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bilbo could make a joke about it, right? Well, this will certainly make it easier for me to visit you, Balin.
Right.
And Balin's like, yeah, and it might facilitate some other
And
things
I
too.
have another trip of my own planned.
Yeah,
Right.
that is a logical point of discussion, and it brings things away from purely mercantile trade agreements. Would there be
personal vendettas?
Yes. Would there be a concession that the elves would want? So, if we imagine that the frame ends with the establishment of some kind of treaty, right, between the elves and dwarves, it doesn't mean that like everyone is friends with each other now. So there's still personal issues, but that they do achieve, like they are agreeing to work together in ways that they haven't before. What would the elves want from the dwarves?
Double the ration of wine. More wine.
More wine. More wine.
Maurice suggested toll road, which is interesting.
Right, that they establish a toll road, so the dwarves will pay. Like they'll let the dwarves do, but the dwarves have to pay.
Right. That would be the simplest. Oh, that's right. The wine is from Dorwinian. Oh, Marie, you're no fun.
Right. Yeah. And Tony, you're right. Movement through Mirkwood is why Thorin and company were imprisoned. So in addressing the issue of dwarves freely moving across Mirkwood, they are coming right at the grievance, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you could say, Diane could say, "I don't want anybody else of my people imprisoned in your place."
Yeah. And it's true, as Tony is recalling, the Bjornings charge tolls. Glóin explains, right? So we know that the Bjornings are going to throw up a toll gate at the far end of the dwarf road. So,
kind of like going from New Jersey to Ohio, or, turnpikes.
They could, I mean, if we have...
Also smithing, there's some, smiths, right? There could be some...
Thranduil still likes treasure, he still wants treasure.
Chris is kind of mentioning gems.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if the dwarves... if we're imagining a scenario in which the dwarves are coming to Thranduil saying what we really want is to travel across your kingdom through the forest and not be molested, and Thranduil is like, what I really want is treasure, both of them are really kind of touching exactly the sensitive points, right, that led to the problems in the first place. So that's kind of useful, actually.
That is useful. Now, there also could be making weapons. I don't know if we want to foreshadow anything. I don't know that Thranduil would necessarily feel the need for that. But I was just trying to think what would be a smith kind of thing that Thranduil would want.
Wouldn't he, though? Didn't his father die
true, yeah.
because he was insufficiently armed?
That's true.
Right?
Well, that would be interesting. That would be very interesting.
Yeah. Now, that would be a spoiler for a future, plot line. We don't want to obviously go into. Let me reminisce about the Battle of the Last Alliance.
Yeah, no, right.
Daggerland,
but Tony does make the point of Sauron would have already declared himself by this time.
Right.
Right. So why not be preparing for future trouble?
And that is gonna be that is going to be an element, right, in these discussions that they're going to be having. And this could be one of the primary points that Bard and Mrs. Bard, we haven't named her yet, but I'll leave that to the discussion board, folks. That's one of the things that Mr. and Mrs. Bard are going to be emphasizing, right, is not just, hey, wouldn't it be nice to patch up our old differences, but there are other issues, right? We need to think about the future, and we need to join together. We can't have the dwarves and elves not working together here.
I can actually hear Nick's voice saying, "Oh, the last alliance you don't want to spoil."
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So, Nick, I was thinking we'll have a flashback to that too, right? Let's just... Yeah. Anyhow, so
So it could be a combination. I mean, or it could be, weapons and gems, or I don't know. But yeah, you guys
yes.
can figure that out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that
But
makes
I
sense.
think
But
that's a really good point. The issue being passes through Mirkwood, and then there would be some kind of negotiation.
yep. Yep.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I like that. Okay.
Oh
But of
yeah,
course,
Marie says, I like that.
yes.
She likes the parallel of the threat of Angband looming over the Noldor. We have the threat of Mordor looming over Bard. I think that's great.
Yes.
Or at
Yes.
Thranduil. Yeah.
The idea of them needing to come together in order to oppose the common enemy. So we have a parallel with, one of the storylines of the season. Yep. Okay. So this
Now
is great.
Thranduil.
No,
Okay. Are we going to do the long blonde hair and all that stuff? The eyebrows, Lee Pace and
we
blah, blah,
can't
blah?
do that. I mean, seriously, how could we
No.
attempt to approach the eyebrows?
Do we know he was blonde? I mean, the Sindarin. So he's Sindarin. They're fair, right? Are they fair? I know Elrond's not fair, but he's not Sindarin, is he?
Let's see.
I was going to say, Marie, he's blind in the Hobbit. Now, wait a minute. She meant blonde. Okay,
Blonde,
so in the
yeah.
Hobbit, he's blonde. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought, Chris. I thought the Sindarin and Teleri were normally dark-haired. It would be fun actually to have Legolas be dark-haired. People would be like, their brains would explode.
Just what we're looking for. But yeah,
Well,
no,
I mean,
that's great.
it would be
I'm
such
fun.
a nice departure from Leggy in the movies.
Yes. That's not a bad thing at all. Just a reminder that this is, not.
Granted, we can do all this with wigs, so I don't necessarily think that hair color is going to determine who you come up with for cast.
No, not necessarily.
But, now, I would think in terms of, any elves would be this way, right? We've already talked about this, willowy type folk, right? Graceful, agile, good dancers, like, what's his name? That played Wolverine. He's a great dancer. I'm not saying he should be well, he would make an interesting Thranduil, actually. Why am I forgetting his name, guys? Hugh Jackman. That's right.
Yeah.
And I actually I hate to say this, but I did like Billy Connolly's Diane in the Hobbit movies. The red hair and the Scottish accent, that was pretty good. I like that.
So we decided we weren't doing Scottish accents for dwarves.
Did we? Yeah, we did. I'm sorry.
I'm pretty sure we did.
We could do like they have in Lothar now in the Iron Hills. They're like Eastern European type.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Hang on. One thing at a time.
Oh, Antonio Banderas. Oh my gosh, he'd be a great Thranduil.
Hang on. We don't have to have specific. The suggestions I'm willing to leave to the people.
But actually, to that point, that actually makes a really good point, which is, Antonio. But I mean, we don't. I keep thinking white Anglo-Saxon Protestant type because that's my brain. But we need to expand out. It doesn't have to be Scandinavian. It doesn't have to be Caucasian. I mean, we can go broader.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And there's no reason that there's even less reason that we can't do that with the Elves of Mirkwood.
Yep.
Now, do we want to show a racial distinction between Legolas and Thranduil and the rest of the Elves of Mirkwood?
That's an interesting question.
Because there is, right?
So the Elves of Mirkwood will look more like Keebler elves?
No! That's not what I was thinking, in fact.
I want you to admire the fact that I did not start laughing right away. I actually made you stop.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Besides, that's Bobway's clan, and everybody knows it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But I do think they're probably shorter. I mean, and also, they're the wood elves, so it would be like, what would be the characteristics that would make them succeed in their environment? The coloring and all that stuff would be, and size-wise would be, they could camouflage easily in the woods and.
Right.
Actually, Tony, Bobway is now my he's now my vault elf in Lotro. The poor guy just stands at my house and just accepts stuff from everybody else. So
That's it.
it is, well, it is more of a costuming choice, but I also think coloration, although again, coloration and hair you can do with makeup, but actually height can too. But yeah, um, I would, I would love to see a little bit more. I don't mean a super dark skinned elf, but a darker skinned elf. I mean,
Yeah,
all
I'd
these
be totally
fair
fine with
skinned
that.
white. I'd like to see a little bit more. No, I'm not advocating for blackface neck. That's terrible. But tanned, yeah. So mix of tanned, like tanned hair, tanned skin, oh yeah, Bray's talking about like tree bark imagery type thing, dark hair, things that would evoke that woods feel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tony, having Sylvan elves look more like Native Americans, for
Ah,
instance, I'd be fine with
that's
that.
interesting.
I'd
That's
be
really
fine with
interesting.
that.
Yeah. It's
Especially
not Pocahontas at Disney, okay, please.
okay, so we won't cast cartoon Pocahontas. But yeah, yeah. Yeah, anyway, okay.
But I do think you guys should talk about that idea of like something Native American or some
Mm-hmm.
other kind of
Mm-hmm.
ethnic
Mm-hmm.
uh wood folk kind of thing. I think that'd be really interesting.
Agreed. Agreed.
Who should we cast as the Raven?
No idea what characteristics to suggest. I totally think that Roak, son of Kark, should still be around, and
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
we should have a younger Raven, like the heir of Roak, who.
I was thinking Rourke should give a toast. Oh, is the thrush gonna come?
Is the thrush gonna come?
Sorry.
They'd invite him, obviously, right? Roak would invite him, even if nobody else did. Yeah, no, talking ravens.
Rourke, son of
Roak,
Rourke.
son of Roak. I like it. I like it. Yeah. Okay. So absolutely yes on the talking ravens. And the only thing that I stipulate is that if we have talking ravens, he needs to deliver at least one like snarky rebuke at some point during the discussions.
I agree.
I do not call this this advice good. Like that's yeah.
By the way, is this the first time we've cast dwarves, right? Is this the first casting
No,
for
we
dwarves?
had Norn last season.
Oh, that's right, we did. Okay.
Yeah, we had Norn last season. And did we do Telkar last season, or did we not do Telkar yet? And Azekal, yeah, we did.
Oh, and Azekal,
too.
okay. And Telkar, okay.
Okay. Anyway, all right. So, Thrin, do we make progress? We need. So, apart from the hair color question, which, as you say, can be a wig issue, so that's not necessarily determining. What would we want Thranduil to look like? I would not want him. I think Thranduil should look kind of weak. I think he should have a. I don't think he's a strong character. I think that Legolas can look stronger than he is. Because I think that Legolas may be stronger than he is. But I think that he should look kind of wussy,
Well, and his sternness could be the sternness of a weak person.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, the sternness of a weak person, the haughtiness of someone with low self-confidence,
Right. Right.
I mean, I don't see Thranduil as a strong character. I don't think we need to make him a strong character. What does Thranduil accomplish in the history of his life? Like, he takes successful part in the battle under the trees, but I mean, like, seriously, does he ever do or accomplish anything?
Well, and think about it. Why would a Sindarin choose to lord it over a quote unquote lesser, at least in a Cinderin's view, group of elves, right? I mean, he's not even with his own. I mean, I'm agreeing with you. Was what I'm doing.
Yeah.
He's not. He's not even with his own folk. He's like a big fish in a little pond kind of thing. You know, like there's some. It's a little bit of a Galadriel, what Galadriel might have been if she had gone down the road she was going down. You know, he's got his little kingdom, but it's not of any kind of real noble stature.
Let's cast Mark Gaddis as Thranduil. Anyway,
like a British lord in India. Now Hakan is onto something there. Like the British Raj type people, you know. That's a good analogy, I think.
Well, Nick, I think if we're opening up the question as to why Galadriel is doing the same thing, that's good. Why is Galadriel doing the same thing, right? What are the reasons why someone would do this? I think there may be several reasons, and I think that some of them might not be reputable, right?
Right.
But anyway, no, I mean, we can make Thranduil. I mean, if people are insistent that Thranduil will be awesome and a great leader, we can do that. I just don't see any evidence for it. Like, what does he accomplish? Why does he need to be strong? What is he? I mean, he's everything that I see Thranduil doing in The Hobbit, and almost everything I hear. Again, the only time that I can remember that Thranduil does something significant, you know, apart from, I guess, participating in the Battle of Five Armies, is the, like, when he like helps to win part of the battle in Mirkwood, you know, during the War of the Ring. I mean, he's isolationist. He is venial. He goes after treasure. He brings an army to loot the mountain.
Yeah.
It's not good. It's not a good look. Like, almost every positive choice, like active choice that he makes, is like at least not great. You know, I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm not saying we need to make him a cartoonish villain or that we make him an object of ridicule. But I'm just.
Did he fight? Do we know that he fought in the Last Alliance? I don't know that we know that, do we?
He might have done, but again, did he accomplish anything? I mean, he accomplished not dying along with his father, but I mean, his father and the majority of the elves of Mirkwood were killed. Did he escape? How did he escape? Right? Did he run away like a chicken? You know, he might have done, right? Maybe he ran screaming from the Battle of the Last Alliance like a coward.
I was going to say he could have been at the very rear and kind of kept backing away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that all that has to be. Again, I'm just saying, like, no. I can literally think of almost nothing that is ever said about Thranduil that leads me to think that he's a good leader or a strong king.
I mean, and think about this. What we're talking about is the backstory to help cast the character, you know, get the right person playing this. But I mean, I just want to like understroke my point again. I mean, what I said about him being like Galadriel, I'm saying if Galadriel hadn't repented, right, this could have been.
Yeah.
Galadriel was quote unquote ruling Cinder, but her thing in Lothlorien was different from what she originally envisioned. I think what she originally envisioned is probably pretty much what Thranduil tried to set up for himself in Mirkwood, right? And he can still be, you know, authoritative, but he can be not a admirable elf, you know, not somebody.
He can have I mean, we do have to make sure that he's not such a scab that the, like, elves of Mirkwood don't chuck him out, right? I mean, like, there has to be some reason that the elves of Mirkwood follow him.
And I can say he could be the elvish Denethor, but before Denethor went crazy. I mean, I wouldn't want him to be.
Denethor's a really strong character. I mean, like, he's a really strong personality and a powerful character.
True. No, you're right.
Yeah.
I can't really think of a parallel, which I kind of like the fact that I can't think of a parallel, because it's like, let's show somebody here who's a, you know, kind of a key character who's not necessarily, he's not evil, but he's not like tip top, perfect, wonderful, awesome hero material.
I don't think, like I said, I'm not making an argument for caricature here, you know. Because I agree, we don't want to like leave it so that nobody sees what the elves of Mirkwood see in this guy.
Right.
But I don't.
Machiavellian? Yeah, could work.
I don't think he needs to be. I don't think he needs to be admirable. Okay. All right. So that.
Yeah, I think that's enough. I think so you are getting where we're kind of heading with this,
Yeah.
and so the thing is to get an actor who has that
Yeah.
sort
So
of.
Legolas should be stronger, should be a better character. I Legolas is just going to be challenging because we will have the ghost of Orlando Bloom looming over every nominee for the character of Legolas. Apart from that, I
Wait till we get to Aragorn if you think that's bad.
wait. What'd you say?
Oh, we did. Did we? We haven't done adult Aragorn yet, have we?
No, we
Yeah.
haven't.
So I was going to say, you think Leggy's bad? Wait until we get to Aragorn.
Right. Exactly. I don't think we want. Legolas is presumably going to be old enough that he doesn't need to actually look young. He can look the same as he's going to look in the Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly would want to. I think we would definitely want to do that in order to make sure to convey, a difference in the scope there. Hakon suggests let's cast Orlando Bloom as Thranduil.
That would be great.
I love it.
Actually, that's not a bad, given the characters who we just thought, I could totally see Orlando
Kind of
Bloom.
a genius idea, actually.
Yeah.
That's kind of a genius idea. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, oh, that's funny. Have we cast Celeborn's sister? We haven't done that yet.
Oh, we haven't.
Do we?
Have we?
Yeah, no, we haven't. Well, so physical characteristics of Legolas, I'm not really sure. I like the idea of having him be darker, to create a contrast between him and the image of Legolas that everyone is going to be expecting. We have cast Celeborn. Like Celeborn, then. I mean, let's make them recognizably, somewhere in Celeborn's neighborhood. Then. Yeah, I don't have strong opinions about Legolas, which might seem strange, but I don't really have strong opinions about Legolas. How tall should he be? He shouldn't be really tall. Right? We always care about height when we're casting characters, because height always has such an important symbolic significance in Tolkien, almost always. What if I would be fine with Legolas being taller than his father? But I don't think he should be. I think that Aragorn should be taller than Legolas. Though I'd be fine with Boromir not being taller. But we can get to Boromir later on. Shorter than Aragorn, taller than Gandalf. Yep, I could see that. Taller than Thranduil. That might be actually a really interesting way to convey sort of the implication of, like, if Thranduil is short, he just sort of stands out as being short. I'm not saying like feet shorter. I'm just saying inches shorter than the other elves around him. Yeah. Okay. And we talked about the men. We talked about the raven. Hey, look, we're almost done. We haven't cast Gandalf. We've never cast Gandalf? Gandalf has not been casted? Oh, man. Okay. We cast a Loren. We didn't cast Gandalf. Right. Okay. Yeah, we cast a Loren in season 1. I don't think we've cast Orifer yet, William. I think we will do that later. But we haven't gotten to Orifer yet. We keep threatening to bring him in, but we haven't yet. Yeah, so Tony's thinking we just do the same actor in very different dress and makeup as Gandalf and Aloran. That kind of works for me. No, you don't want that, Hakan? I get the thing about like indicating the incarnation in the new body. He was young. We cast Aloran as somebody really young. I have no memory of this at all. Absolutely no memory of that. Okay. That was interesting. Then no. All right. I guess we're not doing that. Gandalf certainly can't be too young. Are you sure we didn't cast Gandalf? Didn't we cast... Wasn't Gandalf involved? Really? We didn't cast Gandalf? I really thought we had. Well, anyway. He's in the frame, but we didn't cast him? Huh, okay. All right. I was pretty sure we talked about Gandalf. Well, all right, whatever. Balin. Balin is old, right? He's old. So that's number one thing. And Dan is younger, but pretty old. We're going to have Dis coming in. We said that. She should also be fairly senior. Yeah. Yeah, he was there when Thorne and Company came through Rivendell, Phil. I do think that's when he got into the season 1 frame. Yeah. It was a very, very slight thing. Okay. So did we talk about... So remind me what we talked about last season when we did dwarves for the first time. I remember saying we were not going to have them have Scottish accents. Apart from that, how did we decide? I remember we were talking about the different clans of dwarves. Did we even get to the Longbeards? I mean, we were primarily focusing on, the Broadbeams. We were talking about the, Nogrod and Belegost. Did we even talk about the... Did we even talk about the Longbeards, really? Because we did give each house a particular look. Yeah, well, Marie, they're the ones with the Scandinavian names. But that's just because they live near the people with the Scandinavian language, right? Balin does have to be believable as the guy in The Hobbit, but he doesn't mean he can't be old. He just has to still have good eyes, right? Because he's the lookout man. Apart from that, there's nothing I think that would restrict his role in The Hobbit. Yeah. Okay. Well, Gandalf, I don't know. I mean, I feel like Gandalf is one of the characters in Tolkien's works who gets... I think Gandalf gets as much physical description as anybody that we know of, right? I mean, I think it seems to me it would be a fairly short list of characters whose face and facial features and things received more description than Gandalf's. So I think you guys kind of know what to do with Gandalf here. Yeah. The Dwarves of Moria. So apart from the fact that they have really long beards, what do we know about them? How do we want to do the long beards? And it's hard also because they are going to be the most typical dwarves of all of the most typical dwarves of all of the dwarves. I mean, like, mostly when you meet dwarves in the Third Age, you're meeting longbeards, right? Like when you ask a hobbit about dwarves, they'll picture longbeards, right? Because those are the ones passing through down the dwarf road. Yeah. Would they incorporate refugees of other clans? Likely, Tony. Likely. I think it's not impossible that we could make visual references to that, right? Have folks that are obviously, yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, we can do that. Especially in the Blue Mountains, Hakan, you're right. Ooh, you know what I just realized? The Blue Mountains, right? The Blue Mountains in the Third Age, and Second Age, for that matter, it's like the Dwarvish Refugee Center. It's like where all the dwarves who have lost their ancestral homes go to establish this new sort of ancestral home in the Blue Mountains, right? Nogrod and Belagast are gone. Then Moria is gone. Then even Erebor is gone, right? And now they're all together there in the Lonely Mountains, just like the petty dwarves, right? So we're gonna have there a recapitulation of the petty dwarf story, right? Which is kind of fun. Just saying, I don't know what I want to do with that or if we can afford to do anything, but that parallel just sort of suddenly occurred to me, what we were kind of setting up there and thinking about the Blue Mountains the way that we were. Yeah, the irony is kind of sharp, kind of cutting there, Hakan, isn't it? Kind of hard not to draw attention to that in some way. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything that we can do with that. I'm not sure what we want to do with the Longbeards. Why don't you guys, let's come back to that. Why don't you, because this is not just a character question. I mean, thinking about the characters for a second, Balin is the friendliest of the dwarves. Like, he is the one who is nicest to Bilbo and who reaches out to him most of all of Thorin's company, right? So I think that Balin should be, you know, like the nicest, the friendliest of all of the dwarves. He should have a sort of smiling face. His tragic end, of course, will be like the more poignant when we imagine the smiling face of Balin, son of Fundin. So yeah, he's old, but I want a face with like lots of smile lines, right? Is what I'd be looking for in Balin. In Dan, I have much less of a visual picture of Dan or a sense of his personality really at all. What do we know about him? We know he was loyal. We know he's a good king. We know that he immediately reverses Thorin's worst policies, right? He immediately comes in and becomes generous as king, right? And sort of does things well and does things right. But I think that he should still be. How is he on the grudge meter against the elves? Because he suffered less personally. He's not going to forget the slight to his kin, right? He will hold a grudge for Thorin. Yeah, Ruth, I think Balin should be a little bit like everybody's favorite granddad. Yeah, that works for me. There should be something grandfatherly in his demeanor. Yeah, I'm totally fine with that for Balin. As for Dan, though, he has less of a personal grievance. I think the primary sources of personal grievance, Dees is going to be the really interesting character here. She has most to lose. Or she has lost most, I should say. She should be a voice for unreconciliation, right? I think that... What if Dan's just like really silent? right? Thorin, remember, was kind of pompous. His like Thorin's style on occasions like this, remember when he does his like pompous speeches, and his like, pompous snarkiness at Bilbo in chapter 1. I'm thinking Dan is not going to be pompous and outspoken and ironic in the way that Thorin was. I'm thinking Dan is very quiet. Yes, he's not a very important dwarf. He doesn't, pray don't mention it, right? That's not a Dan line. I'm thinking. Yeah. Yeah, William says the one defining feature is his charity, or at least I would say, William, his willingness to give away the treasure, to make use of the treasure in the way that to do with treasure the way that it's supposed to be. So I would think he would be sort of taciturn but reliable, right? Yeah. I don't know if this helps us much with his physical appearance, with casting him, but maybe this helps some. Certainly nobody, whose face is all light, bright, and sparkling. Okay, all right, this gives us something. Then we already cast Bilbo. Dees, what should Dees look like? Stern. Very stern. Matriarchally stern. Everybody should be a little bit afraid of Dees. Even Dan should be a little bit afraid of Dees, I think. Severe. She should be severe. Yes. Celeborn's sister. Celeborn's sister is a green elf. She's sort of firm and reserved. Yeah, no, William, we haven't cast Feely and Keely, which is fine because they're dead. We don't need them yet. But no, we've never cast Feely and Keely. Celeborn's sister. She is the semi-leader of the Green Elves, spokesperson for the Green Elves in their isolationist phase. Does she talk? Like ever? I'm not sure if she does. Very rarely. Tony wants her to be like a beautiful woods witch. I would be okay with her being very beautiful. Mild but stern. Yeah, she has to be stern. Maybe a little bit off-putting. Mysterious. Green elves are kind of mysterious, right? Yeah. Not Dees level of stern. No, Dees is like terrifying, right? She's intimidating. Yeah, Tony wants her to be kind of like a prophetess. Okay, something like that. I mean, not mystical, right? Not, very slow to speak. So Nick, this is going to be awesome for dialogue, right? Let's put Celeborn's sister and Dan and Dees all in a room and have them all not talk to each other. This will be great. What if Dan is surprisingly gentle when he does talk? That'd be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? That would be kind of interesting. Yeah, Tony, have Celeborn's sister be kind of Mandos, like play the Mandos role in the Elvish group. The one who very rarely speaks, but when she does speak, she sort of makes a pronouncement, Yeah, I kind of like that. I kind of like that concept of her role there. I think that's sort of what I was thinking. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Let's have Dan be sort of kindly and soft-spoken. Yeah, mild-mannered. Avuncular, not in like a familiar sense, right? I don't think like, he shouldn't be necessarily somebody that you... I think that he should look kind of intimidating, but be someone who, like, when he actually opens his mouth and talks, you're sort of like, oh, well, he's kind of nice, actually, right? He would be an interesting opposite to Bard, right? Who looks gruff and is gruff, right? And then there's Dan, who looks gruff and isn't. Yeah. Now, it's funny. Throughout the show today, people have been suggesting characters or people, and I've been familiar with almost none of them. A couple, but very few. I haven't watched Game of Thrones yet, so there's a large number of Game of Thrones characters have been suggested as like examples of the kind of thing I'm talking about. I haven't watched Game of Thrones yet. I'm waiting for it to be done. When it's done, I'm going to watch it all the way through. That'll be a future project, but I haven't done it yet. So I have no idea. I have no idea who most of the people are that you're suggesting. Yeah, so Dan is, sort of quiet and soft-spoken. William says that could make his ferociousness in battle the more surprising. Yeah, have him be an absolute terror in battle. But like gentle and soft-spoken. Love it. I love that. That's a good... his name is Ironfoot, for crying out loud, right? He has gotten the nickname Ironfoot from his youth. And yet to have him be sort of gentle and soft-spoken. I think of the line, we get so few of his lines, right? But I think of the line that is attributed to him after after the battle of, the battle of Azanarbol, is, I can really hear that being delivered in like a soft, sort of gentle voice, as he's like, I'm the only one who's looked into Moria, and I like it. I love that concept. Okay. So the bad news is that we only talked about one slide today. The good news is this is a thing we've been needing to work on for a while. We have, apart from when we agreed on the concept of the frame way back when, we have utterly neglected it. I think this is the perfect time to return to it, frankly, because having now worked out more, we have a much clearer sense of what the themes of the season are, right, and what's going on in the season. So now, kind of coming back to this to the frame, we're now really prepared to kind of think that through in some interesting ways, and it will make it easier in the future to be looking at some specific frame suggestions and how we want to map the frame across the 13 episodes. So we didn't accomplish everything that we set out to accomplish today, but we did do some good things. So that's really good. Next time, I'm not 100% sure what we're going to do. Are we going to go on and discuss some of the other creative things that we didn't get to today? Are we going to go ahead and do a couple episodes and come back to this? I'm not sure. We'll see what you guys want us to do. Make your opinion heard on this subject on the discussion boards, and we'll see what happens. Anyway, we'll figure that out for next time. What I do know is that next time we're back on the regular schedule now. So next time will be the beginning of May. So May 3rd Friday, May 3rd will be our next time. I won't be around next week anyway. I'm going to Iceland next week with my family. It's a family vacation, our big family vacation this year. We're going to Iceland. Very excited. So I'm going to have fun there, and then I'll be back the week after, and we will move forward with whatever we're going to move forward with. So thanks, everybody. for joining us. Thanks for a lovely discussion here today. I think we did a lot of good things and made a lot of progress. And I got to have a little fight with Nick about spoilers and everything. It's been a good day, right? So thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening, and Godspeed. Okay, very good. So thanks, everyone, for being with us here. And we'll be back in a couple weeks. So I'm going to switch over for Grifflet. Those of you who are on Twitch, if you want to switch over to the Lotro official, I will be on there in a few moments with Grifflet. But otherwise, okay, very good. Thanks, everybody. See you guys later. Although the theoretical budget of our hypothetical blockbuster may be unlimited, the production budgets of this and the rest of our fun alternative educational projects are unfortunately not. If you have enjoyed joining our production team, please consider donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.